I like this lesson a lot. Why? Because as an accountant who has worked in both public practice and industry, the discipline of preparing well-documented and organized working paper files is equally applicable. In public accounting, GAS requires the auditor to document all the evidence that supports the audit opinion. As a reminder, this would include the risk assessments and the basis for such risk assessments, the procedures or tests performed, the information obtained, and your conclusions reached. In public accounting, the auditors must assemble the final version of the audit file within 60 days of the date of the audit report, at which time the firms initiate what is called a file freeze. New information received after this time would be separately included in the front of the file. The reason for doing this is to help ensure the integrity of the audit conclusions and to prevent hindsight from playing a role in prejudicing the conclusions. Different firms organize their files using varying formats, but they all have the same logical consistency. Files may be documented electronically or in paper form. Permanent files maintain information that has pertinence from year to year. Things like corporate bylaws, long-term contracts, lending agreements, and systems documentation. Current files maintain all the working papers supporting the current period. And these files will include risk assessments and materiality, planning information such as the staffing plans and budgets, and the audit programs, audit evidence, and audit conclusions. Working papers have a logical flow to them that needs to be well understood, not only by the preparer, but by those who come behind later, including the audit senior, manager, and the partner, the second partner who may not have as much familiarity with the client, office inspectors who have no familiarity with the client, the file, or the firm's file preparation methodology. And finally, future junior auditors with limited experience who may be trying to follow along with your work next year. In larger organizations, much of the working paper file is actually prepared by the client. So the principles we talk about here are of equal relevance to those who will ultimately work in industry. Whether you are a public accountant or in industry, the preparation of strong working paper files is the key to achieving strong controls over financial reporting if you are the client, and the audit if you're a public accountant. Let's take a moment to dive into the structure of the current files. Most firms have some sort of standard indexing system that organizes the working paper file. It allows for the logical drill down beginning at the financial statements, with each section of the working paper file reference to the major sections of the balance sheet and the income statement. The financial statements get vouched to the trial balance. The trial balance represents the ending balances in the general ledger. The general ledger contains all the accounts and the activity that has occurred throughout the period. The trial balance is often grouped. Like accounts are aggregated first, and the subtotals carried forward to the financial statements. For example, a company may have 5 bank accounts which get aggregated together, reported as one line, cash, on the balance sheet. Lead schedules are often the title pages of each section of the working paper file. For instance, for the cash account, we would have a lead schedule with our 5 general ledger accounts that comprise cash. Behind the lead schedules, we would provide support for each account balance. Support in this case would include a bank reconciliation for each account, followed by a bank statement, followed by a bank confirmation. On each working paper, you will document the audit procedures performed. You may initial a checklist either manually or electronically on the audit program to signify performance of the procedure. But you will also mark up the working paper using audit tick marks. Audit tick marks are simply a shorthand notation for documenting the work performed by the auditor. Whether it's footing, or adding a column of numbers, or checking the extensions of an inventory costing, the auditor makes little marks to show that they've been there and done that for those who later review the file. So the types of working papers that are often found in the current file include a detailed listing of what makes up a balance, such as an inventory listing or cash receivable, reconciliations, which agree the balance of the general ledger to the supporting evidence, for example, a bank reconciliation, continuity schedules that tie together the opening and closing balances, such as a detailed fixed asset schedule, which tracks the opening cost plus additions, less disposals to arrive at the ending cost, tests of reasonableness, which are working papers that attempt to predict the balance of an account and then compare it to what has been recorded. Procedure summaries would document the results of any testing performed, either substantive tests or tests of controls. These sorts of working papers don't actually have subtotals or tie to a particular balance because their purpose is to document the results of the sampling that has been performed. Referencing is an extremely important practice that helps readers make their way through the working paper file. A reader should be able to start at the financial statements and drill into each and every number to determine what it is composed of and what evidence has been gathered to support it. Similarly, referencing also needs to enable a reader to start with evidence and trace its inclusion through the working papers to the financial statements. Other items that get documented in the working paper file include proper headers that identify the client's name, the period covered, and a description of the contents, the initials of the preparers, the date of preparation, and a legend for any audit tick marks that were used. Whenever possible, the auditor should document conclusions about the segment under audit consideration. Such conclusions are like little mini judgments about the application of each audit procedure. These conclusions should plainly state whether the balance as presented is fairly stated. This is a personal opinion and very important for the overall integrity of the file. Auditors will often import the client's trial balance into their own software. And audit software tracks the balances from year to year to more efficiently automate the analytical review procedures. It also enables the auditors to make adjusting journal entries as necessary when they come across errors. If an error is identified as material, they may also ask the client to make an adjustment. Reclassification entries are also common. A reclassification entry is necessary even when the general ledger is correct. For example, it's not uncommon to have credit balances in the accounts receivable. If these credit balances are material, the auditor will often reclassify the amount to accounts payable for presentation purposes only. Working papers are the property of the auditor, even if they are a copy of the client's prepared working papers. However, the client owns the data contained on the working papers. As such, the auditors have confidentiality obligations to protect the privacy of the information contained within these files. The working papers can only be shared with another party with the express written consent of the client. The tendency for inexperienced preparers is to put a lot of support, some of it unnecessary or irrelevant, in the current files. More paper or larger electronic files doesn't necessarily mean a better file. In fact, the objective is to put the right evidence in the file and communicate the work performed as efficiently as possible without sacrificing any sufficiency. The thicker the audit file is, the more challenging it is for the reviewer to really stand back and evaluate the key pieces of audit evidence. And as I said at the outset, in my years subsequent to working in public practice, I have continued to use these professional documentation skills to support the financial reporting process. It is just as important for you to do all the little documentation things we have talked about in this lesson well, as it is all the audit testing you perform to gather the evidence in the first place. This is a lesson in communication skills for auditors. Until next time, don't stop till you get to the top. When you get to the top, don't stop.